David never imagined he would be in this position. The man who once had it all, the wife, the home, the dreams for the future, was now staring at the crumbling remnants of his life. He thought he knew Lena, thought he understood her every gesture, every smile, every touch. They had shared so much together, through both laughter and tears. But now, in the quiet of their once shared home, David was forced to confront an undeniable truth. It all started so innocently. They were just two people who met at the right time, in the right place. David and Lena had been inseparable from the moment they first laid eyes on each other. Their connection was instant, an undeniable spark that neither could resist. David had been the one to make the first move, his confidence leading him to approach the beautiful, kind-hearted woman he had been admiring from across the room. They had spent hours talking, laughing, sharing secrets, and by the end of the night, they both knew something extraordinary had just begun. Their relationship blossomed quickly. Days turned into weeks, weeks into months, and before long, they were planning their future together. Marriage was inevitable, and David had no doubts in his mind that this was the woman he would grow old with. There was no hesitation when he proposed, no second thoughts. He was sure, with every fiber of his being, that Lena was the one. But somewhere along the way, things began to change. David didn't notice at first. Life, as it tends to do, had a way of distracting him. Work pressures, family commitments, and the usual challenges of married life began to pile up. But through it all, David believed that the bond he and Lena shared would withstand anything. He trusted her, with every inch of his heart, never questioning her loyalty or her feelings. And then, just like that, everything began to slip through his fingers. It started small, a missed text, a forgotten date, an empty seat at dinner, but David couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. He told himself it was just the stress of life getting to them, that Lena had her own worries to deal with, that they would work through it like they always had. But deep down, he knew. There was a distance growing between them, and it wasn't just physical. It was emotional, a chasm widening with every passing day. Lena was slipping away from him. David tried to ignore it, tried to be the supportive husband, the one who held the family together. He would surprise her with flowers, make her favorite dinner, and plan spontaneous dates to rekindle the spark. But nothing seemed to make a difference. Lena's smiles grew more distant, her responses more rehearsed. The warmth that once radiated from her had faded, replaced by a coldness that David couldn't understand. One night, after weeks of wondering what was wrong, David confronted her. He needed answers. He couldn't keep pretending that everything was okay. "Lena," he asked gently, trying to read her face, "what's going on? You've been distant. I don't know how to fix this if you won't tell me what's wrong." At first, Lena was silent, her eyes avoiding his. The tension in the air thickened, and David's heart raced. He had never seen her like this, so withdrawn, so unreachable. She finally spoke, but her words hit him like a ton of bricks. "I'm not happy anymore, David," she said, her voice flat, emotionless. "I need more than this. I need freedom. I want to date other men." David's world stopped. His breath caught in his throat, and he felt like the floor had been ripped out from under him. This wasn't happening. Not Lena. She couldn't be serious. This wasn't the woman he had married, the woman he had promised to love and cherish for the rest of his life. "What do you mean?" he asked, his voice trembling. "You want to date other men? After everything we've been through, this is what you want?" Lena didn't flinch. She didn't even look at him. Instead, she sighed, as if she had rehearsed this moment for a long time and had already made up her mind. "Yes, David," she replied, her words like ice. "I've made up my mind. I can't keep living in a cage. I want to experience life, and I want to be with other people. I need to feel alive again." David's chest tightened. The woman he had trusted with his heart, the woman who had vowed to be by his side forever, was telling him that their love meant nothing to her anymore. She had made her choice, and it wasn't him. He stood there, frozen, unable to comprehend the words he had just heard. Lena, his Lena, the woman he had shared every piece of himself with, was asking for permission to destroy everything they had built. And what's worse, she seemed so calm about it, so detached. It was as if the years they had spent together were nothing more than a fleeting moment to her. David felt a fire ignite within him, a fire born from betrayal, anger, and the overwhelming desire to make Lena understand the weight of her actions. He had loved her unconditionally, given her everything he had, and now she was throwing it all away without a second thought. She wasn't just asking for space, she was asking for an open door to someone else's arms. In that moment, something inside David changed. The man who had once been vulnerable, tender, and patient was replaced by a man who would not stand idly by while his heart was torn apart. He had been hurt, humiliated, but he wasn't going to let this slide. He wouldn't beg. He wouldn't plead. He wouldn't try to convince her to stay. No, David wasn't going to beg for something that wasn't worth fighting for anymore. If Lena thought she could walk away from their life so easily, then she was about to learn that there were consequences for her actions. David looked at her, really looked at her, and saw for the first time the woman she had become. The woman who no longer cared. The woman who was willing to toss aside everything for the sake of her own selfish desires. And in that moment, David made a decision. A decision that would alter the course of their lives forever. As the anger simmered inside him, David knew one thing for sure: Lena had made a grave mistake, and she would regret it. The vengeance building inside him was more than just a fleeting desire for justice, it was a need to reclaim his dignity, to show her that actions have consequences. David's heart was broken, but his resolve was stronger than ever. He wasn't going to cry, beg, or beg for her forgiveness. No, he would take control of this situation. And the path to doing that? That would begin with the one thing Lena never expected: David would divorce her, and he would make sure she would feel the full weight of what she had lost. As the days passed, the weight of David's decision grew heavier, but his resolve only strengthened. He had been blindsided by Lena's betrayal, left reeling from her cold, calculated words. But now, the anger that had been simmering beneath the surface had crystallized into something sharper, something that could no longer be ignored. Lena had made a choice. She wanted to live a life free of the commitments and responsibilities that came with being a wife. She wanted freedom to date other men, to explore new possibilities, to feel the excitement of a world beyond their marriage. But what she hadn't considered was the depth of the consequences for her actions. David wasn't going to let her walk away from their years together without facing the repercussions. He couldn't just sit back and watch her tear apart everything they had built. She had treated him like an afterthought, like their marriage was nothing more than a chapter to close when she grew bored. But David wasn't going to be anyone's afterthought. The first step was the hardest: telling Lena the truth. Telling her that he was done, that their marriage was over. But he had to. He had to end this. For his own dignity. For his own peace of mind. David waited for the perfect moment. He knew Lena was out with friends, celebrating her newfound freedom, while he was left behind to pick up the pieces of their life together. He didn't know what Lena was doing, or who she was doing it with, and honestly, he didn't care anymore. The moment came when she walked through the door, her face flushed with excitement, her laugh a little too loud as if to convince herself that she was happy. But David wasn't fooled. The spark in her eyes was hollow, empty. She wasn't alive, she was running from something. From him. From their past. From the truth. "We need to talk, Lena." Her eyes darted to his, startled by the tone in his voice. For the first time in weeks, he wasn't pleading. He wasn't looking for her approval. He was standing tall, commanding the room. Lena's face faltered for a moment, but she quickly masked it with a smile, walking toward the couch like nothing was wrong. "Is everything okay, David? You look different." David felt a surge of bitterness rise within him. Different. She was the one who had changed. She was the one who had cast aside everything they had for the thrill of something new. But David wasn't going to let her manipulate him any longer. "I'm done, Lena. I can't keep pretending that everything is fine when you've already checked out. You've made it clear that you don't want me anymore. You've chosen your path, and now, I'm choosing mine. I want a divorce." Lena froze. The blood drained from her face as the gravity of his words hit her. She opened her mouth, as if to speak, but no words came out. David didn't give her the chance to recover. He had made up his mind, and there was no turning back. Lena had never seen this side of David before. For years, he had been her rock, her protector, the man who would always be there. But now, the tables had turned. The man she had discarded was no longer the meek, vulnerable person she had once known. He was someone different, someone she hadn't counted on. David was no longer angry in the way he once was. No, this was controlled, calculated rage. The kind of anger that only comes from feeling truly betrayed. He had been humiliated, stripped of his dignity, but now, he was taking control of his own life. He wasn't just ending the marriage, he was taking back everything she had stolen from him, his trust, his love, his future. "David, wait. You don't understand. I didn't mean for it to go this far. I thought I could just be free for a while. I wasn't thinking about what I was doing to you." But David wasn't listening anymore. He had already checked out emotionally. The woman he had loved had already left him, and the one standing before him was someone unrecognizable. Her apology didn't matter. It was too late for that. "You don't get to decide how this ends, Lena. You don't get to come back and act like everything's fine when you've already broken us. The truth is, I'm not the one who needs to understand. You're the one who needs to face the consequences of your actions." David's voice was steady, unwavering. Lena's world was unraveling, and she knew it. The woman who had demanded freedom was now being forced to face the one thing she had never expected, David's final decision. There would be no second chances. No more excuses. This was the end. But David's revenge wasn't just about the divorce. No, it ran deeper than that. He knew that Lena would never truly understand the pain she had caused, not unless she had to face it head-on. And that's when he made the decision that would change everything. David wasn't going to just walk away from this marriage. No, he was going to make Lena feel the weight of her choice. He would ensure that she understood the consequences, not just of ending their marriage, but of the way she had treated him. He wasn't going to be the one left behind, forgotten. David began to take steps to secure his future, to move on in a way that Lena never anticipated. He contacted a lawyer, and as he made the necessary preparations, he made sure Lena couldn't manipulate the situation. He made sure that when the divorce papers were served, they would come with a cold, undeniable truth. Lena thought she had won. She thought she had escaped the ties that bound her, but in the end, she was the one who would be left holding nothing. No family, no trust, no love. She would have to face the reality of her choices, and David would be there to remind her at every turn. As the divorce papers were drawn up, David couldn't help but feel a sense of satisfaction. It wasn't just about revenge, it was about reclaiming his life. He would never be the man who begged for love again. He would move forward, stronger, wiser, and more determined to never let anyone treat him like this again. David's revenge was not just in the ending of their marriage, it was in the reclamation of his own power. Lena thought she could break him, thought she could walk away without consequence, but she was wrong. The man she had discarded was about to rise from the ashes of their broken marriage and rebuild a life that was his and his alone. And as for Lena, she would have to live with the consequences of her choices for the rest of her life. The days that followed were a whirlwind of paperwork, legal meetings, and the crushing reality of a marriage that had gone from a dream to a nightmare in the blink of an eye. David never imagined he would be here, having to fight for his own dignity, but as the divorce process moved forward, there was no turning back. It wasn't just the legal battles that weighed heavily on David. It was the emotional toll, the sense of betrayal that still lingered in the pit of his stomach. It had been hard enough to face Lena's demand for freedom, but the realization that she had thrown away everything they had built together, without a second thought, stung in ways he couldn't have prepared for. But David had never been one to back down from a challenge. And this was the ultimate test of his strength. Lena had underestimated David. She thought that by asking for a divorce, she could free herself from the confines of their marriage without consequence. She thought she could live her life without being held accountable for the damage she had caused. But she was wrong. And as the divorce papers were finally signed and the final separation was officially underway, she found herself realizing the depth of the mistake she had made. David had kept his word. He wasn't going to beg. He wasn't going to try to salvage something that had already been destroyed. He had walked away, but not before making it clear that his life would move forward, stronger and better without her. It wasn't long before David found himself in the company of others, people who valued him, who appreciated him for who he was. His friends rallied around him, offering support and encouragement in ways he never expected. There were laughs, there were tears, but most importantly, there was a sense of renewal that filled the space where Lena had once been. As he rebuilt his life, David realized something important: he was free. He was free from the chains of betrayal, free from the emotional weight that had threatened to crush him. Lena had thought she could break him. She had thought that by leaving, she could take everything from him. But she had underestimated the strength within him. And as the weeks turned into months, David's transformation became evident. He was no longer the man who had pleaded for love, the man who had been devastated by Lena's betrayal. He was a man reborn, stronger, and more determined to live his life on his own terms. Meanwhile, Lena's life wasn't as carefree as she had imagined it would be. Sure, she had the freedom to date other men, to explore new relationships, but what she didn't anticipate was the emptiness that would come with it. The novelty of being free wore off quickly, replaced by the gnawing feeling that something was missing. She found herself scrolling through social media, stalking David's posts, seeing his new life unfold before her eyes. And every time she saw him smiling with friends, laughing, moving forward with his life, a bitter pang of regret twisted in her gut. It wasn't supposed to be like this. Lena had thought she could have the best of both worlds, freedom and excitement without consequence. But David's absence left a hole in her heart, one she couldn't fill with anyone else. The men she dated were fun, sure, but they were no David. They didn't offer her the same depth, the same connection, the same understanding. She had never realized how much she had taken him for granted until it was too late. Now, she was left with nothing but the bitter taste of regret. And then came the moment when Lena realized the truth. David wasn't just moving on, he was thriving. He was succeeding in ways she couldn't have imagined. He had launched new projects, rekindled old friendships, and was finally living the life he had always wanted. The man she had once thought was weak, vulnerable, and lost without her was now more powerful, more confident than he had ever been. David had taken control of his life again. He had become the man he had always been meant to be, the man Lena had tried to break. But the more she saw of his new life, the more she realized that she had lost something irreplaceable. Lena reached out to him. The first message was casual, almost apologetic. She wanted to catch up, to see how he was doing, to test the waters and see if there was any chance for reconciliation. But David didn't respond. He didn't need to. He had moved on. He had no space for someone who had treated him as disposable. When the second message came, more desperate this time, David's resolve was unwavering. He had made it clear, months ago, that their relationship was over. The past was behind him. And there was no place for Lena in his future. David was internally thinking that she had her chance. She made her choice, and now, I'm living my life on my own terms. David had come to terms with his emotions, had learned to trust again, but this time, it was in himself. He didn't need Lena to validate his worth. He knew exactly who he was and where he was going. The third message, however, was different. This time, Lena reached out with something David hadn't expected, a confession. She admitted, for the first time, that she had made a mistake, that she had never truly understood what she had until it was gone. She apologized for what she had done and begged him for another chance. Lena messaged to David. David, I know I've hurt you. I've been selfish, and I've been wrong. I made a huge mistake. Can we talk? Please, I want to make things right. But by the time that message reached David, it no longer mattered. He had already found the peace he was looking for. He had already forgiven her in his heart, for himself, not for her. David's revenge was never about anger or hate. It was about reclaiming what was his. It was about learning to live for himself again. And as Lena's message sat unanswered in his inbox, David realized that this was the moment of true victory. Not in the revenge she had feared, but in the fact that he was free, completely, entirely free. He had moved on, built something better, and now there was nothing Lena could say to undo the journey he had made. David's life was his own, and no one, not even the woman who once held his heart, could take that away from him.